If you ever dreamed of being tied or dreamed of tying someone up, but you're a bit scared because you're kind of freaked out about everything that's so complicated, when you thought about doing shibari and have a look at all those complicated knots, you're not alone. I had exactly the same. So I asked Shay Tiziano. To me, she's the queen of self-bondage, and she's doing really amazing stuff. So check out her channel for sure. But she's amazing if it goes to self-bondage and about safety and all. And I asked her just to show me her simplest tie, her simplest knot. All you need is a tie, a necktie, or a scarf, and you can already do it. So if you're up for some bondage, some tying, and you really don't want it to be too complicated, then check out this video. Have fun and play with passion.
All right, so next we're going to get a little hands-on and show actually tying something with a necktie. And as we're doing this, please keep in mind all of the safety and negotiation pieces that we've already talked about. I'm just starting with pretty standard necktie. You want, again, something that's nice and soft. Don't use your very best neckties for this because it can tend to damage them. So make sure that you are not using your nicest necktie that you need for your job interview tomorrow, for example. And make sure you also have your cutting implement like we had talked about. The basic technique that we're going to do to start with, and we'll start kind of with the technique of tying and then get into the experience and assignment of being in rope, or being in neckties, being in bondage. And so we're going to just kind of start with the basic technique. And this is a technique that I think is really useful to use anytime you want to tie two things together. So we talk in bondage about columns, which a column can be a wrist, a forearm, an upper arm, ankle, a calf, a thigh. So anytime you want to tie, two wrists together, a wrist to an ankle, two ankles, which is what we're going to start with, your thigh to your torso, any of those things, this type of basic technique can work really well. And you could do this with a different, you could use the scarf instead of using a necktie. Neckties tend to be pretty available, so that's why we have that, also kind of standard. So what I'll do with showing it is I will kind of show it all the steps and fairly quickly. And then if you want to try along, we'll do sort of slower step by step. And then we'll get into some of the communication and being bound pieces. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Perfect. So I'm going to start just demonstrating the basics of the tie. Always kind of interesting to demo on yourself. Sometimes it might be easier to do this on your thighs, in which case you might tie two neckties together. But I think for purposes of today, I'm just going to tie around my calves. So there are 4 different steps that we're going to do. The steps are wrap, twist, switch under, and knot. We're going to do those steps in that order. And there's lots of ways to mix it up, so we'll talk that through as well. So my first step is I've just got my tie roughly in the center behind my 2 columns, and I'm wrapping around my 2 columns. So that's my first step, wrap. The next step is twist. I'm going to take my tie and just twist it like this. So you kind of have 4 90-degree angles right here. When I was first kind of creating this, I asked one of my partners, who's a very geeky person, can you think of a sexy way to say 4 90-degree angles? And he's like, you don't think that's sexy already? I'm like, well, okay. We have different ideas of sexy. So, all right, twist. You could twist an extra time, and that would be fine. Part of why I like this technique is that there's lots of different steps where there's multiple ways to do it, but one twist is okay. The next step is kind of the trickiest one, and this is the switch under step. So I'm going to take the small end of my tie. I want it to end up where the big end is. The big end of the tie, I want it to end up where the small end is, and I want to pass around everything to do that. So this small end, I'm going to pass around. So I put my hand on the far side, on the foot side, and I'm going to pass that around, behind, and come up where the big one is. So I passed around in the back and came all the way around. And then with the big one here, I'm going to come, this time I'm coming through on the side of my knees, and I'm going to cross it around, under in the back, and up on the ankle side. So now they've switched places. So that's the switch under step. Then I'm just going to tie a knot. Don't overthink it. Consider like if this was your shoes, how would you tie a knot? Doesn't have to be anything in particular. So I'm just making a knot. If you feel like that's not secure enough, you have some extra, you could do another knot. So it's a double knot. For those of you who know knots, that's either a square knot or a granny knot. It doesn't matter for our purposes. We're tying neckties just for fun. So that is the basic tie that I have. And you can see, even when I kind of pull and struggle in it, it doesn't tighten down, which is one of the things that we want to look for. I don't have this super tight since I'm tying for demo purposes. It's even looser than it might normally be. But you want to have, be able to put some fingers underneath. We don't want to be creating tourniquets. We want this to have some looseness to it. So let me try this kind of step by step.
Cool. So can I do it too now?
Yes, please.
Yay.
All right. So you can go either around your thighs or around your ankles and start behind, with the center of your tie kind of behind your ankles or thighs. And that's the wrap step. Then you're going to twist. You're going to twist them.
Only
like
once,
this.
right?
You can do twice, but once is plenty. So once is just fine. And then you kind of see your 4 90-degree angles. And you want these two pieces of your tie to switch sides. So this one that's on the ankle side, you want to go between your ankles, around behind everything, and up to the knee side. And this one that's on the knee side, you want to go between the knees, behind everything, and up on the ankle side.
It's really ridiculously simple.
It's ridiculously
I think
simple.
It's very effective, no?
It's pretty, I like to think so. And so my final step is tying a knot. And don't overthink it. People get intimidated because it's, bondage. But you can just pretend it's your shoes and just tie a knot. And I usually tie a double knot. So I'll usually do a knot and then a second knot.
I love this. It's actually still very comfortable. It's not, I was trying to do it quite tight, but I have a bit of motion still in it. So, but I'm tied.
Oh, good. Awesome.
If I do it here, it feels like it can go down.
Yes. So normally I'm trying to kind of show it so I'm a little bit high up. But if you wanted to tie the ankles, which we could do next, it's mostly because it's harder for me to reach down here when I'm trying to show for the camera. But maybe we could show it one more time down on the ankles, and I'll show you kind of a variation.
Okay.
And talk through that. So looking at kind of the ankles here and doing that one, we're going to start the same way. So I have my tie behind my ankles. I wrap it around. And this is where I could vary things. At the wrap step, if I wanted to, I could wrap around a second time and then do everything the same, twist, switch under, and tie. And then I would have kind of a double wrap. But trying to keep things simple for now. So I have my wrap step.
But it's also nice because then the knot is on the back.
Yes, the knot would be on the back.
Yeah.
All right, so I have my wrap step and my twist step. And again, you could do multiple twists. It doesn't really do much for you, but it's not going to hurt anything. So I do my twist, and I'm at my ankles. I'm going to switch under. So again, this one that's on the ankle side, I want to bring it down around everything. So it's coming down across the back and through everything. This one that's on my knee side is I'm coming between my knees, coming around the bottom, around everything, and up on my ankle side. And this is another place, if you're thinking this is a little too loose, I've got too much space, you'll notice that it tightens, right? When you create this cinch in between. If you wanted to tighten it more, what you can do is do the switch under step again. So I can create some more wraps in between. So I'm again switching back and forth. And you'll notice it gets tighter the more times that I do that. You can also start with your ankles a little bit further apart if you like, for folks who have, you know, some mobility things and maybe their ankles, it's uncomfortable for them to be too close together, or it just doesn't work for their body. This is a way that you can still restrain in this tie, but not have to have the ankles right up against each other, is by adding more of those switch unders, which creates almost a little spreader bar effect in between the ankles.
Oh, because then it stiffens up actually.
And it does tighten quite a bit. So something to keep in mind. And then I'm going to finish just with the knot again.
Brilliant if you want your submissive to be like, just be able to walk, but not too like really small steps. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So there's lots of different, you know, ways that you can use something like this. And it feels kind of, you know, it still feels pretty comfortable because I have with a tie a lot of contact. I wouldn't do this the same way with a piece of rope, right? Because that gets back into the elephant versus stiletto, and a piece of rope is so thin, I wouldn't do a single wrap. But with a necktie, I've still got a nice amount of contact with my skin. And so that's pretty nice. And there's lots of different variations on doing this. So for folks who like to get tied up, the kind of challenge or assignment that I would set for you is to really communicate and verbalize, which can be challenging to do as you're experiencing the sensations, even if you're doing this to yourself, to really challenge yourself to talk through everything that you're feeling, and to move around in the bondage and talk through everything you're feeling. And you can also do this with like showing some kind of variation, right? Because I can do the same tie. For example, double column could be tying my ankle to my thigh, could be tying my thigh to my torso. Lots of different kind of ways to do this. So I think it's a little bit, it's harder to, I think, visualize when you're doing it on your ankle to thigh, but the steps are the same. So I'm doing a wrap.
I need to check if it's long enough. It feels like I'm not able to do it tight enough.
That could be. So it's a matter, sometimes for folks, if it doesn't work for you to kind of bring your ankle up against your thigh, it can help to pad with a pillow in between, and then you can kind of still have that sensation of being tight while it isn't having to be all the way there. But if I'm doing it this way...
It's incredibly easy. I can't believe it.
Oh, there you go. That looks awesome. You did that really great. So I have my wrap step.
Really so simple, and I love it.
And then I switch under, and that comes around to the other side. So switch under, and then tying a knot. Right there.
Wow. It's also fun to play with because a tie is like, it's thicker on the one side and it's thinner on the other side, to feel like what the, because now I can feel this is pretty tight here. And it's probably, it will probably hurt less. I mean, it's not really hurting, but I will probably feel it less when I do the small part on the upper side, because this is more meaty.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So kind of experimenting with where the placement is can be, I think, really great. So the challenge, especially for folks who like to be in bondage or who like to be tied, is to really think about verbalizing every step of that. So if I especially was with a partner, practicing that with my partner and having them really encourage me to talk through every sensation. And it feels super awkward to kind of describe everything that you're feeling. But what that might look like is, if I was tying like this, okay, I'm feeling some tension as my leg is kind of tight up on itself. And now I'm feeling the sensation of the tie. When it tightens down, I feel that kind of tension mostly on my thigh, but a little bit on my ankle. And when I'm digging through in between, that also feels a little bit pinchy sometimes as I'm kind of digging to take that through the middle right there. And I definitely feel that tightening down when you create the cinches and when it gets the knot tied. And now that that leg is tied, it feels pretty neat to move around in it and kind of try to straighten and to not really be able to. I can feel the tension right here, but I don't have any sort of numbness. It all feels really nice and good. And it feels like this hugging sensation on my thigh as well as my calf. So that's just an example of like trying to talk through kind of every little detail of what you might be experiencing and just practicing what that feels like.
And this is wonderful to get to know each other in how you communicate and what type of communication you use.
Yeah, and if I was doing this in a DS kind of sense, like with a partner that I had a power dynamic, I might challenge them to, if you stop talking, if you stop describing what you're experiencing, then, whatever we work out as some sort of consensual, maybe I'm going to like give you a little flick with my finger in a way that is consensual, but maybe you don't like it, right? Or I'm going to, whatever that thing might be. So really making it so that it's a challenge for that person, for your partner to continually verbalize and talk. And it's something that you're really teaching them that you want to know about those sensations that they're having.
And this is brilliant because you need to teach them first to communicate before you need to teach them to be tight, actually. Because then once you're getting used to communicating, then you can get into all types of bondage. This is giving me so much inspiration for...
Yeah, there's so many ways you can use this type of thing. Like it's kind of tricky to tie your own wrist, but I can tie, my wrist to my ankle this exact same way. So I did my switch under step. I'm doing my, and I can maybe switch under a couple times just to make that a little bit tighter. And then tie it in a knot. And then you have this really cute, tying your ankle to your wrist. And that can be really useful for a number of things because you can do that in this position and then you tip backwards and then you're in this position.
Absolutely. I think I can do this on someone else too. This is
awesome.
Simple enough for me. So I'm very, very happy with this. I think this is going to create so much fun already for starters to play with the tie. And to start with this is, I think this is, for starters, this is fantastic.
Awesome.
This is so much fun.
Yay. And I think it's super helpful to practice, you can tie two stuffed animals together, or if you have a big stuffed animal, tying their two legs together. Because like you said, when you do it with a partner or you do it as part of, when you're trying to do play, sometimes the pressure is different or it just feels, it's harder to do it. So making sure that you've really practiced it to the point where you don't need to like think through every single step of it so that you can focus on your partner and not focus on what you're tying, right?
I love it. Thank you so much.